Greetings, travelers. I'm your host, the C-Dot that knows a lot, Dr. Waluigi. If there's one type of humor I dislike that blew up in the 90s and the 2000s, it would have to be gross-out humor. While I was only born in the mid-90s, I did grow up with a lot of cartoons that had that style. And while the later part of the 2000s was when this style of humor started to die out, the 90s was when it ruled television and other forms of media. Case in point, today's review of the great yet dated superhero video game, Boogerman. The game was published and developed by Interplay Productions, the same company that published the Baldur's Gate, Clay Fighter, and Earthworm Jim series. The game was another in the mascot platformer genre that were popular in this decade after the success of the Mario and Sonic series. However, the only thing that stands out about this game compared to others was its appeal to kids who liked gross-out humor. But that isn't necessarily a bad thing, as many other games of this era have become cult classics that others have sought out for their collection, and this game did receive high reviews from other critics at the time. There was even a point where a Kickstarter had been made to update the game for modern consoles. However, the Kickstarter didn't do well enough, and eventually the update was scrapped. And after playing the game, it's not hard to see why. The story goes that Professor Stinkbomb was working on a machine to help rid the world of pollution with his invention called the Zap-O-Matic, that would send our pollution to an alternate dimension called Dimension Excrement. Unfortunately, an eccentric millionaire named Snotty Ragsdale takes up a job as the professor's janitor to investigate the legitimacy of the professor's invention. Once he accidentally sneezes on the device, breaking it, an arm reaches out and grabs the main power source, which leads Snotty running into the men's washroom and changes into a superhero form, Boogerman, and begins his quest to find the power source and prevent the inhabitants of Dimension Excrement invading our world. The game's presentation is where I feel is its biggest weakness. I get that this came out in the 90s and that the game was made this way to appeal to young kids who liked gross-out humor, but in my opinion, having to look at the same type of layouts and the designs of the villains isn't that appealing and can get very boring. Seriously, the world this game creates isn't that appealing when it's just the same green sewers or walking through intestines throughout the entire game. On top of that, can I just say that Boogerman's design is really stupid? If you look at any superhero character design, even from the 90s, there's something that makes them pop out and recognizable to the public. Batman with his iconic cape and cowl shaped like the wings and ears of a bat, Spider-Man having a web motif on parts of his costume, or Superman's costume having a color coordination of red, blue, and yellow to help him stand out. But then you have the design of Boogerman. First of all, his costume is just a ripped up green shirt with green sweatpants, a red cape, fingerless gloves, a black eye mask, and socks with holes in the big toes. He looks like a homeless man from the mental ward instead of a superhero, which is even more funny when the game says he's an eccentric millionaire and his costume of choice is something he probably found in a dumpster. Though I will say he does have a chin that Bruce Campbell would be jealous of. Despite the awful presentation, I do think that the gameplay is pretty fun. The game came out on both the Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis, though I've only ever played the Genesis version, so that's the one I'll be talking about as both versions are basically the same game. Though I do agree with fans that the Genesis version has the worst audio. The game works like this. Your goal is to get to the end of each stage till you fight a boss on stage 4. You know, the typical 90s video game platforming fun that we all love. To fight enemies, you have several powers to hurt the enemies and bosses. You have boogers that you pick and flick at enemies with by pressing the A button. If you get the milk bottle, you can spit loogies with the same button. You can also use a super belch or fart if your gas meter is high enough, which allows you to fly throughout the different stages. Yeah, one of the big issues I have with this game is that you can actually lose your powers over the course of the level, which isn't fun for those of us who want to use the powers throughout the game, but ends up with a limited power meter that honestly doesn't add that much difficulty. This is very simple gameplay, but it's still fun to play and does show that even something this old has a charm that makes others want to come back and play these games. I find this game is very mixed compared to ones I've played before. On the one hand, it has fun gameplay that, while nothing special, is worth playing the game all the way through. However, what holds this game back from being an all-time Genesis classic is the setting. The game is clearly dated with a lot of the gross-out humor style, and that can turn some people off, especially if you're not into that kind of humor. I will say that if you're looking for another fun platformer for the Genesis, this is one I do recommend. But as far as one with a great superhero premise, then you may want to look elsewhere. I give Boogerman, a pick-and-flick adventure, a 6 out of 10. If the gross-out humor weren't the main highlight of the game, then I would say it belongs with the many classic superhero games on both the SNES and the Genesis. As is, it's only an okay platformer from an age of other great platformers. Thanks for watching, I'm Dr. Waluigi, and remember, don't judge a book by its cover, cause you'll never know what's inside. Good night, everyone.